Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Odyssey Recaps Below the Surface Edition. Today we're recapping Book 16, titled by Emily Wilson as Father and Son. The chapter opens on Odysseus, still magically disguised by Athena as an elderly beggar, and the swineherd Eumaeus making breakfast, when suddenly Eumaeus's guard dogs run towards an approaching figure. The dogs don't bark, indicating that the person arriving isn't a stranger. Odysseus is telling Eumaeus that a friend must be coming when the door opens and there stands Telemachus, son of Odysseus. Imagine this moment. Odysseus hasn't seen his son since he was an infant, and all of a sudden there he is before him, grown into a man, freshly returned from a sea voyage, having successfully evaded the murderous suitors. And yet, Odysseus can't embrace him, or even show any hint of recognition or joy. He is simply an elderly beggar, and instead must watch as Eumaeus embraces his son like a father would. Eumaeus does exactly that, and the poem says that the swineherd ran toward his master, reminding us that for all of his affection for the family, he is still a slave. When Eumaeus reaches Telemachus, he kisses his face and weeps for joy, just as a father, when he sees his own dear son, his only son, his dear, most precious boy, return from foreign lands after 10 years of grieving for his loss. The poem goes on to say that Eumaeus wraps his arm around Telemachus and kisses him as if he were returning from the dead. This is such an interesting moment where the lines blur between father, son, master, slave, beggar, watcher, participant, the living and the dead. We are reminded that Eumaeus is not Telemachus' father, he is his property, but Eumaeus embraces Telemachus like a father would, while his real father must watch without revealing himself or his own emotions. And let's not forget that Telemachus has returned from a voyage at sea, a voyage that would be dangerous for anyone, but for Ithaca, the sea has a much darker connotation. 20 years ago, their king took a whole fleet, filled with their husbands, sons, brothers, friends, and neighbors, and none of them ever returned. The sea has taken disproportionately from Ithaca, and to send their prince, the final link to the Ithaca of old, out upon those dangerous waves, made even more dangerous by those who wish him dead, was a risk, to say the least. His homecoming feels nothing short of miraculous, highlighted by the poem saying it was as though he returned from the dead. Eumaeus greets him heartily, calling him sweet light and my child, and invites him in, saying that it's a rare treat to see him in his home, as Telemachus usually doesn't come into the countryside, instead staying in town to watch the evil horde of suitors. This line reveals a little of the extreme stress Telemachus and his family has been under since the suitors descended. Telemachus hasn't been able to supervise or look in on his family's interests the way he normally would. He has been tied to the house, doing his best to help his mother preserve their home and livelihood the best he can. In so many ways, the suitors have hindered his ability to learn and grow into the role he was born to fill. Telemachus replies, calling Eumaeus grandpa, telling him that he has come to see him and hear if his mother has remarried yet. Eumaeus responds that Penelope is still loyal, sitting in the house and weeping. The constant questions of Penelope's loyalty really reveal how impossible her situation is. She is receiving pressure on all sides to remarry, including from her own father and brothers, who, after her husband, she theoretically owes her loyalty to. And even in purely practical terms, waiting 20 years for a man who almost everyone assumes is dead is a big ask. Without a husband, she is without much needed protection. To see how long she's held out, especially while spending the past 4 or so years essentially living under siege by the suitors themselves, is nothing short of astounding. And yet, her loyalty and character are under constant scrutiny. It's also worth noting that those who question her character the most, Odysseus and Telemachus, are the very ones she is working so hard to protect and hold out for. But back to the story. Telemachus is ushered into the house, and the first interaction we have between father and son is rather anticlimactic. Buried in the middle of a stanza, the disguised Odysseus offers his seat to his son, who refuses, and tells him to sit while his slave finds him another seat. Eumaeus does so, and the men all sit and share a meal together, the first meal Telemachus has ever shared with his father. After they've eaten, Telemachus turns to Eumaeus and asks him where the stranger at their table has come from. Eumaeus tells him that he has come from Crete, that he has wandered lost through many towns, but finally was brought to Ithaca and escaped to this house. He tells Telemachus, he is all yours, your supplicant, to treat however you desire. How will Telemachus treat this poor supplicant? What sort of a man is he? One could argue that this is yet another in a series of tests that Odysseus is putting his family and household through. Will Telemachus treat the strangers with the dignity and care Zeus demands, or have the suitors influenced him with their brutish ways? If it is a test, Telemachus passes. He is immediately anxious for the safety of the visitor, telling Eumaeus that he cannot possibly take him back to the palace, as he is still too young and weak to fight the suitors alone, and his mother, in her current precarious position, can't help either. He's worried the suitors will harm the elderly visitor, and says no one man can hope to defeat them. He instead asks if Eumaeus can keep the poor man there in the swineherder's cottage, and Telemachus will send him some fine clothes and food and help him on his way from afar. Finally, the disguised Odysseus speaks. His first major speech to his son is interesting. One would expect emotion or personal questions, and those are there, but the famed strategic mind of Odysseus is on clear display as he is also asking tactical questions, probing for weaknesses in the suitors' defenses. He tells Telemachus that he must speak out, that his heart breaks to hear of the terrible things the suitors have been doing to the prince's home. He asks if Telemachus lets the suitors bully him, and if the Ithacans have been turned against him. Does he have any brothers to help support him? It's very important for Odysseus to know if the people of Ithaca still support him and his family, or if they have turned against them and sided with the suitors. It'll be far harder for Odysseus to reclaim his role as king without the support of his people. And seeing as he has not only been gone for such a long time, but also vanished along with their fleet and all their best fighting men, not to mention their family members, it's entirely possible that the people of Ithaca want Penelope to remarry and form an alliance with another family who might better protect Ithaca. These questions are important, but the disguised Odysseus is able to couch them as simple compassion. As for asking about Telemachus' brothers, this could be another test of Penelope's honor and loyalty to see if she has had any more children in his absence. But the disguised Odysseus is not done speaking, and he tells Telemachus that he wishes he had youth to match his will. He wishes he were the son of Odysseus, or better yet, he wishes that he were the man himself, returned at last from wandering, able to fight alongside his son. He says they can still hope he will come home, and that if he were Odysseus, he would destroy the suitors, and if he were to die as one fighting against so many, it would be worth it. He cannot simply sit and watch the suitors commit such terrible crimes in his own home, dishonoring strangers, wasting wine and bread, and raping slave girls, and all for nothing, just a waiting game. And of course, the waiting game is precisely the point. This is a siege, and as Odysseus knows all too well from his sack of Troy, the point of a siege is waiting for the other side to crumble while you pressure them and disrupt their supply lines. I'd also like you to note here that he mentions that the suitors are raping the slave girls, assaulting the household staff, as well as its stores. This is going to come back at a later point in the story, so as awful as it is, please keep it in mind. Telemachus replies soberly, telling the disguised Odysseus that the Ithacans are not his enemies, and he has no brothers. But the suitors, the cruel invaders, are too strong for them, both physically and in numbers. They have come from many different islands, and his mother doesn't refuse the concept of remarriage, nor can she end their courtships. And so they keep eating, consuming my whole house, and soon they may destroy me too. You may ask why Penelope doesn't simply send them away, but there are many factors to consider here. Penelope doesn't really own anything. She's a steward of the throne for her husband or her son, but without a husband, she must also once again abide by, or at least be seen to abide by, the wishes of her father and brothers, who perhaps want her to remarry for political reasons of their own. And yet, for 20 years, she has been holding the throne of Ithaca, keeping things running as she waits for her husband to return or her son to grow up and take the throne for himself. But before her son was old enough to take the throne, the suitors descended. Strong, powerful men with connections and alliances that she can't easily dismiss or offend. City-states must be able to defend themselves or risk being conquered by neighbors. And as we've said, Odysseus took the Ithacan fleet and its host of fighting men with him when he left for Troy. The threat of his return could only hold off any potential conquerors for so long, and each day that passes, it seems less and less likely that he'll ever return. Penelope can't risk offending the suitors or outright declare that she'll never remarry, because in her relatively undefended state, that could invite a military invasion. So, instead, she must play a careful game, balancing hope, dangling the possibilities of taking the throne through marriage without bloodshed or creating feuds, and all the while desperately delaying, hanging on to the possibility that her husband is still alive and will return. Telemachus ends his summary of their situation by asking Eumaeus to go and tell his mother that he has returned alive, but just tell her, as there are many who wish him dead and would come find him if they knew where he was. Eumaeus says he'll tell her, but also asks if he may tell Laertes, Odysseus' father and Telemachus' grandfather, as he has been so wrapped in grief over Telemachus' absence that he has stopped eating and drinking, and just sits all day, weeping and sobbing, worn down by his grief to skin and bones, a perfect visual metaphor for the way the suitors are eating away at his lineage. Telemachus replies that he's saddened to hear that his grandfather is so grief-stricken, but says not to tell him, instead telling Eumaeus to ask his mother to send a slave girl in secret to run the news to Laertes for greater safety. Athena watches as Eumaeus leaves, and once he's safely gone, she reveals herself, but just to the disguised Odysseus, who comes out into the yard and stands beside her along the side of the house where Telemachus can't see them. Athena tells him that the time has come to tell his son the truth, so that they may strategize together how to kill the suitors. She will join them at the palace soon, as she is itching to fight. Athena touches Odysseus with her wand, changing him back into nice clean clothes and restoring his appearance. And there's an interesting point here. The text says that in restoring his appearance, she made him taller, younger, his beard grew, his cheeks filled out, but also that he became black-skinned. The Greek word used is melanokros, containing the root word for melanin, meaning dark-skinned. Now, certain people try and argue that what the text really means is that he had a suntan, but that completely ignores quite a few factors, including that the ancient Greeks didn't see the race the same way we do, and also that these were seafaring cultures that had trade relations with other cultures and nations, many of them in what is today known as the continent of Africa. The next time you hear people complaining about non-white actors being cast in cinematic adaptations of the Odyssey, remind them that if we really want to be accurate to a fictional mythological tale, then Odysseus really should be played by a black actor. I personally think Chiwetel Ejiofor would do an amazing job. I think he's perfect. Anyway, back to the text. Restored to his original appearance, Odysseus goes back to the house. Telemachus is shocked and looks down in case the warrior before him is a god. He asks why the stranger looks so different, and if he is indeed a god. Odysseus replies, "I am no god, I am your father, that same man you mourn. It is because of me these brutal men are hurting you so badly." It's easy to imagine the pain in these words, the guilt behind the knowledge that his absence has placed his family in so much danger. He kisses his son, crying, but Telemachus doesn't believe him. He says he can't be Odysseus, that a god must have cast a spell to cause him further pain, that no mortal man could change his appearance so totally and with such ease. But Odysseus reassures him that he is indeed his father, saying, "It is me, no other is on his way. I am Odysseus. I suffered terribly, and I was lost. But after 20 years, I have come home." He tells Telemachus that Athena is the one who disguised him, and finally, Telemachus believes him, and at long last, we had the reunion we've waited for. They embrace and weep, lamenting and grieving together, joy at reunion and sorrow at all the lost years mingling together all at once. Eventually they calm, and Telemachus asks how he came home. Odysseus tells him the Phaeacians helped him, and that he has treasures hidden in a cave, and that Athena has told him that he and his son must plot together how to kill the suitors. He asks his son exactly how many suitors there are, and what kind of men they are. Odysseus says that together, he and Telemachus can plot and see if they can kill the suitors alone, or if they're going to need help. Telemachus lists the amount of suitors and their followers, including some henchmen, and where they all come from. All told, there are 118 men, including 12 suitors from Ithaca itself, a small army of fit, trained young men, at least some of whom Telemachus says are top-notch fighters. Seeing the full picture of how many men they've been facing underscores just how skilled Penelope has been at playing them all off for so long. Telemachus doesn't think they can fight them alone, though. He says, "I am afraid you will be paying back their violence at all too high a price." He asks his father if there is anyone who can help them in their fight. Odysseus responds by asking if the goddess Athena and her father Zeus are enough to help them, and says that he is certain they will aid them in their fight. He tells Telemachus to go back to the palace at dawn and join the overconfident suitors. He will transform back into a beggar and have Eumaeus escort him into town. He says that when he arrives at the palace, if the suitors abuse him, Telemachus must say nothing. He must hide his feelings and watch his father suffer. No matter what they do, Telemachus must stay back and simply tell them to stop. He predicts that the suitors will ignore this, but that Telemachus must stay back no matter what. When the time for their doom has come, Athena will let Odysseus know, and he will nod to Telemachus, at which point Telemachus must gather all the weapons in the house and hide them, keeping out only 2 swords, 2 spears, and 2 thick shields for them to fight the suitors in an ambush. Athena and Zeus will help by bewitching the suitors. But he says there is one final instruction. Telemachus must tell no one, not even Penelope or Laertes or a single slave girl, until Odysseus has infiltrated the house in secret, so that he may test Penelope himself. He says he will also test each of the male slaves to see who is loyal to the family and who is not. Telemachus says that they don't have time to test all the men individually, but he agrees they must find out about the women and test the slave girls. They must find out which are innocent and which dishonor him, but not the men. That can wait till later. There is a clear split in the way women and men are viewed, with women automatically being a more immediate danger and less worthy of trust. But again, we'll get more into that later. We switch now to the palace, where Eumaeus and a messenger from the ship Telemachus took on his voyage have both arrived at the palace to tell Penelope that her son has arrived home safely. The suitors are upset to hear that he is back and alive. They were so sure he would be killed. At that moment, the suitors have been waiting to ambush Telemachus' return, and they all plot together what to do next. Antinous, who has been the ringleader of the plots to murder Telemachus, is angry, and he curses that the gods must be protecting Telemachus. Far from dissuading him, though, Antonia says that they must renew their efforts to murder Telemachus, saying that if he is left alive, he will obstruct their courtship. And now that he is aware of their plans, he may gather the townspeople and tell them about the murders. And when the townspeople hear about their crimes, they may join Telemachus and turn against the suitors. Antinous says that they must put a stop to it. They need to catch Telemachus before he gets home and murder him, so that they can rob him and share his wealth and property amongst themselves, leaving his mother and whichever man marries her to keep the house. It's interesting here that Antinous uses the words murder, crime, and rob, and isn't afraid to go against the clear will of the gods who are protecting Telemachus. This reinforces the idea that although already sanctioned by a god, the slaughter of the suitors would be a just act, a punishment of criminals and not murders of innocents. However, Antinous does end by saying that if the rest of the suitors disagree and want to let Telemachus live, then they should all leave immediately and leave him what's left of his father's riches. And instead of wasting the wealth of his house, they should all go home and just court Penelope from afar by sending her gifts, as they should have all along. There's silence. Then after a bit, another suitor speaks. He says he doesn't want to kill Telemachus, as it's a dreadful thing to kill someone of royal blood. So first they have to find out what the gods really want. If Zeus decrees it, then they'll kill Telemachus, and he'll urge them all to join him in doing so. But if the gods don't approve, they just won't kill him. All the suitors agree to this, and they return to the palace. At this point, Penelope decides to show herself to the suitors. With her servant women at her side, she comes downstairs and confronts Antinous, calling him a brute, a sneak, and a criminal, saying that he has a reputation for being intelligent, but those reports are wrong. He's insane. She asks how he can be so disrespectful of the gods to try and kill Telemachus, who is watched over by the gods. She reminds him that Odysseus had protected his own father and saved Antinous' father's life when the people of Ithaca wished to kill him for engaging in piracy. Now he eats the food, drinks the wine, and courts the wife of the man he owes his father's life to, and what's more, is trying to kill his son. "You are hurting me," she says. "I tell you, stop, and make the other suitors stop as well." A brave move, and what's more, her choosing of Antinous as the one to confront shows how well informed she is on who is in charge of the plans to kill Telemachus. Another man answers her, Eurymachus, and tells her not to worry. No one will ever harm her son. He swears that if anyone tries to kill Telemachus, he will kill them himself. He says he remembers Odysseus, and that when he was a child, Odysseus was kind to him and would hold him on his lap and feed him from his own plate. He says now Telemachus is the man he loves most in all the world, and swears that the boy is in no danger, not from us. There is no help for death brought by the gods. But he's lying. The poem says, he spoke to mollify her. All the while he was devising plans to kill her son. Oath-breaking is a serious business in Greek mythology. Even the gods are bound by oaths, and there are consequences for those who break them, mortals and immortals alike. We could read this moment as a condemnation of the suitors, a moment where the poem's narrator is stepping in to remind us that no matter what these suitors say, they mean harm and are willing to murder, lie, cheat, and steal in the hopes of gaining wealth and possibly a throne. Penelope leaves the suitors and returns to her room and weeps for her husband until Athena blesses her with sleep. As evening falls, the swineherd Eumaeus returns to his home to find Odysseus transformed back into the old beggar man, and he and Telemachus cooking dinner together. Telemachus asks Eumaeus for news of the town, of his mother, and of the suitors. Eumaeus says he didn't stick around to ask questions, but he thinks all the suitors are back inside the palace. Telemachus and his father share a look and a smile. They finish their meal and then go to sleep, their plans in place. And that's where the chapter ends. We are in the end game now, everyone. Join us next time for chapter 17. I will see you there.